Welcome, everybody, to the Always Hope podcast, a production of Willwood's Faith and Marriage. This is Dr. Mario Sacasa, and I pray that your 2023 is off to an amazing start. Well, January 2nd was the anniversary, the 150th anniversary of St. Therese, the Little Flower's birth. So it's fitting that we take a look at how the Little Flower's teachings can help us to learn how to let go of stuff and declutter some things from our lives. So joining me on the show today is Laraine Bennett to talk about her new book, The Little Way of Living with Less. In today's episode, we discussed the challenges of letting go of things, how St. Therese's teachings can be applied to our modern lives, how to make minimalism not just some trendy lifestyle choice, but something that aids us in our growth in our spiritual life, practical tips, of course, of how to get started, and navigating the differences of clutter and letting go of things and those challenges that you have sometimes with your spouse and with your children. If you find this show helpful, please leave a rating or write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share it on the socials or simply just tell a friend about it. We'd love to be able to spread the word about the good work we're doing here with this podcast. So many blessings to you all. God bless you. And let's get into this conversation with Laraine Bennett. Laraine Bennett, welcome to the Always Hope podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. This is wonderful.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. I mean, it's great that I had Art on the show. I can't remember when. It was last year or earlier this year. My mind's kind of losing track of things. Earlier this year, I think. And then I gave a talk up in Arlington and had the opportunity to meet you guys in person, and which was just awesome. And so, I shared all this with Art, but I'm going to start by sharing it all with you also. So if the listeners who already heard that episode are find this redundant, then I'm too bad, But just want to thank you, just to thank you guys for the book, the temperament that God gave you. I know we're going to be talking about your newest book, but just to say that I know that book, when it first came out 15 years ago, I deeply appreciated it. I was just kind of graduating from my master's degree, and it was one of the first books that I kind of looked at that had this kind of integrated perspective of how do we really bring our faith into our clinical work together. And so I know that I've recommended it to others, and like I said, it helped me tremendously. And so really just want to say, thanks for writing that book before we get into this other book.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you liked it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I know that you guys have done lots of lectures in lots of different places, and your response to that book, how has that been for you over the course of these 15 years, and still giving lectures about it, still in print? I mean, like, how do you feel about all of that? How's that for you?
Actually, that's kind of amazing, because we come across people all the time who say, "Oh yeah, I read that book." And it seems like everybody, I mean, we keep running into people, but yet there's also a lot of people who have never heard about it. So it's interesting. And it's fascinating to me that it just, I think it's a timeless topic. Mm-hmm. And we keep on getting requests for, speaking engagements and stuff, like, all the time. We're always surprised at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is timeless. You guys picked a theme that I know you're pulling from ancient traditions as well. So that
exactly.
Kind of, you picked a timeless topic to be able to speak about. And then you put the game together, Know Thyself, which we've played as a family a couple times as well. What inspired that?
Oh, I had wanted to do a game. Okay, so knowing temperaments, you would know that I'm part sanguine. So of course I had a game in the back of my mind all the time. Uh-huh. And so a game has to be fun. And but I couldn't figure out how exactly to do it. I have been thinking about that for maybe 10 years, I would think. Wow. And I kept looking at games how would I play this game? And then it wasn't until we had our adult, our kids are all adults and they're all married and they have kids, so, mm-hmm. But so it was our adult kids and their spouses. And so I got them together and I said, look, I've made a bunch of cards and let's just try this out. I had cut up pieces of paper, mm-hmm. And so that was my first game that I tried it out with and we had fun, but that's how I figured out how we could ultimately turn it into a game.
Yeah, I think I told you this, but the way I felt like playing it was like it's like playing apples to apples, but you're the apple. You know?
Exactly. Oh, that's exactly what yes. I love apples
Yeah.
to apples.
I love apples to apples. We play that when we play utter nonsense, all these card games, where you're kind of comparing and you have
Yeah,
to pick a judge and, all that stuff. So
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And or it could be a family appropriate Cards Against Humanity,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
that's
exactly.
also
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
those
exactly. I was gonna say Cards
judge
Against Humanity,
games.
but your humanity, I guess. Cards for Humanity, maybe
Yeah.
we'll say that one. No disrespect to the
Yeah.
makers of that game, of course. That's a fun one also.
Yeah.
But but I think it just even in that we played it a few times and what ended up being, I think initially when we started playing it, people felt uncomfortable. We're like, oh, this is gonna get uncomfortable. How's this gonna feel? How do people really think about me? I mean, how does my family really think about me? And
Mhm.
those are really, questions that we don't normally ask our family members. Like, hey, so how do you
Right.
think about me? And so to
Yeah.
force that on people, everybody kind of felt a little nervous. Like, am I just about to get trashed by my family? Is the truth going to come out? But but I think what ended up
Yeah.
happening the couple of times we've played it has been that people felt more encouraged than anything else. It's like that
Mhm.
you could take the cards that
Yeah.
that people felt describe you, and you can look at those cards and say, well, this is how my family
Right.
really sees me, and ended up being
Yeah.
more of an encouraging experience, than I think we kind of initially felt. Now, I know the boys said
Yeah.
that
Well, maybe
they
your kids are younger
go ahead,
too.
go ahead, say that
So
again.
your kids are younger, I think,
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
aren't they?
So 8 to 18. I
Or
have four boys that
oh,
range
you have
between
eight to
eight.
18.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, eight
okay.
to 18. Yep. And
No,
then,
so I was thinking, yeah, maybe if they were younger, maybe they felt more nervous about,
but I even played with my
should I really
in-laws
say
and
what
my
I think, Dad?
but even with my in-laws were like, I don't know, what are the grandkids about to say
Oh,
about me and
okay.
stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of that kind of came out.
Right.
But the boys, what
Hmm.
they did say is that my teenage sons, they felt that if they played it with just their friends, then they would just, start, trashing each other and stuff, and
Right.
you know, having having a more, I don't know, say fun, but more whatever. I don't want to say disrespectful, but they just like to trash each other. So, anyways, all right,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So,
I understand.
all right. Well, that's great. So thanks just even for that. That's a great resource, and certainly we'll have links to Sophia Institute where you can get both of those books and the other, temperament books. But that's not what we're talking about today. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. What we're talking about today is your new book that you've just written called The Little Way. I want to make sure I get the full thing, kind of correct. The Little Way of Living with Less, Learning to Let Go with a Little Flower. And so you take this idea that's kind of in vogue right now, which is this
Mhm.
minimalism, and everybody wants to live in a van, or everybody wants to have a tiny house, or there's a
Yeah.
lot that's out there in terms of knowing how to get rid of things and live a kind of more minimal life, which is certainly in trend. But you do a wonderful job in this book kind of asking this question. It's like, is it important for us to kind of imbibe this life, this minimalism, just for its own sake? Does it become its own way of, I don't know, like branding, like culture, like I'm part of the van
Mhm.
life, crew or whatever? Or can we take these ideas that are good and apply them to the spiritual life? And I think that's
Exactly.
kind of the angle you're taking on that. So what do you see about that in terms of this trend that's existing? What's the good there? And then how do we take some of that and apply it then to our life as Catholic Christians, on the journey towards heaven?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, that's kind of the process that I went through myself. So we were, living out in the suburbs, way far away from work, and at least an hour and a half each way, both of us, and we're living in this giant, typical McMansion with 4,000 square feet. And one day, Art says to me, my husband, he goes, after all the kids had left the home, they're grown up. He goes, we only live in about 10% of this house. And yet we're spending a lot of time and energy and money fixing it up, cleaning it, repairing it, and all the stuff we have. Like, do we really need all this? And that was kind of the question that prompted us, I guess, to start this process, which is, as you said, is kind of trendy right now, like downsizing and decluttering, or minimalist
Mm-hmm.
living and small living. Even, I mean, I even toyed with the idea of, maybe we should get like an RV and live in an RV. But then the thing is, when we actually started doing this, I discovered how hard it actually is. It
Mm-hmm.
actually was really, really hard. And that's when I kind of realized that I needed a little more spiritual help in this. It wasn't just about it wasn't just about, reading how to declutter, or it wasn't just reading about how to organize. I was going through a process of really detaching
Mm.
from all this stuff that we had accumulated. And in the book I describe, like I had one room that was like a giant 12-foot by 12-foot junk drawer. It was like nobody wanted to go in that room. And the garage itself was jam packed to the ceiling with everything but cars. So we had to get rid of this stuff. And so I discovered how difficult it was. And so actually I turned to Saint Therese, the little flower, because I was thinking the little way it applies to, small living as well. But actually I turned to her because the virtues that she exemplifies heroically are virtues that I actually discovered that I needed to grow in order to do this process. Virtues like, um, you know, uh, detaching, and simplicity, and trust, and humility, and poverty of spirit, and charity, and gratitude, all these virtues that she practiced heroically. So that's kind of how the whole thing came together in my mind, that I would then take a look at the spiritual realities underlying this popular trend of minimalism. And as you said, minimalism for minimalism's sake isn't really the goal either, so that's another question. But yeah.
Well, we'll get to that question in just a second here. But,
Yeah.
the fact that you turned to Saint Therese, and who obviously was a cloistered nun, did not live in a suburban
Mm-hmm.
life, and that you
Right.
could take the teachings of her life, of her story, of her message, and then being able to apply that, into a lay context, a modern lay context, I think is really one of the brilliance of the books, because sometimes we can read the spiritual writers and we can feel beaten up by it. They're thinking that, well, we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to live a life just like that, or we're
Right.
supposed to then run to a convent in France, and that's the answer, because that's what she
Mm-hmm.
did. And so literally we're supposed to take that on. And that's not the right way of being able of reading the lives of the saints. That's not what we're supposed to do. Is that we're supposed to read the lives of the saints to then be encouraged and to say, okay, well, what do these teachings apply to our context and our circumstance? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're doing here, with this book, is trying to say, like, we don't have to live in abject poverty to live simply.
Right.
We don't have to be, join a mendicant order of beggars, to live out detachment. Like, there's
Right.
ways that we can practice this in a healthy, balanced way, but still being able to look at ourselves and look at the circumstances and look at what we have and ask ourselves hard questions. Am I really too attached to some of these material things, or
Mm-hmm.
or am I just hoarding this stuff because it brings a sense of comfort, or I feel that I need this stuff somehow to make me feel at rest within my home?
Right. Oh, you absolutely hit on something I think that's really crucial. And that is, why do we um, get so attached to these things? And because we know that we are pilgrims, we're on a journey to our true home, which is heaven. But along the way, we just get so attached, so easily attached. And Father James Shaw, I read a book on him by him that was called Far Too Easily Pleased. And it's that, and he kind of brings it out. It's like, this is a beautiful world and we have beautiful things here, but we just get just too easily sucked into it. And that's probably because of original sin, because, and it's like, it seems to be the fate of everybody. We want to find security, as you said, like it's like, it gives us a sense of security if we have, whatever it is. Or for some people, maybe it's not things so much, maybe it's power, or maybe it's prestige, or it could be anything, I guess, other than God. But what we want is to really detach ourselves from all that prevents us from loving God with our whole hearts, our whole souls, our minds, and all our strength, and that's exactly what Saint Therese was teaching us. And that's what she said. The only good thing, she said, is to love God with all one's heart and to stay poor in spirit.
Right.
And it's interesting too that Saint Therese, though she lived in this convent, she was actually raised in a beautiful home, and she was she was a modern saint, and she had an appreciation for beautiful things, and she even knew the allure. And so, but she was at a young age, she realized that this was going to be too tempting for her. And so she turned her focus entirely to God. But she, even in the convent, I read some of the stories where she wanted her things to be like, she would paint a little bit, paint her, but she wanted her brushes to be kept nicely, so these were little tiny moments of that she had to offer up, that where another nun would come and take her stuff, or not her, I mean, they probably didn't have anything in for themselves, but she would at least appreciate, well, at least let's leave the paintbrushes in order, and things like that. Like, you don't need to throw things around, or she would get splashed in her face. There's all these things that are beautiful stories that she tells, showing her incredible charity. But also it shows that she had that appreciation. So she wasn't like some, I don't know, postcard image of, or even the way I think of many of the saints, that they're just so detached. They're so far beyond us that we can't even relate,
Right.
but
Right.
I could relate to her.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that, especially when we have kids. Like, stop touching my stuff. If you guys take tools out of the toolbox, just
Yeah.
just put it back where you got it. How hard is that? Like,
Right.
why is that such a hard thing? I say it every time. If you take cups out, don't leave it out. Just put it back where it belongs. It's okay,
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that sense is a universal, and it's a human context, that we all have that, and it's good to know that Therese, experienced that
She
also.
experienced it.
And there's nothing wrong with that per se. I mean, God calls us
Right.
to have, we all have our plot in the garden, and we're supposed to
Yeah.
be good stewards of the treasures that God gives to us. And that's very clear, obviously, in the parable of the talents. So we're steward of what he has given to us, not just our gifts and our personality and our talents, but also what we use that for in the possessions that we have. We
Right.
have a certain dominion over things because we share in that capacity that God has. But of course, the problem is when we then, as you've been saying, we define ourselves solely based on the things that I have, or we define ourselves by the positions of power that we have, the prestige that we have, or we look for these things to be the only things that provide a sense of comfort or a sense of rest, rather than
Right.
allowing these things to be vehicles or pathways. There's always the sacramental lens, as Catholics, where we see that God can use these things to then bring about his grace. And as soon as those devices or those tools or the possessions that we have get in the way of that, then we have to navigate and know, okay, am I making an idol out of this thing, or am I putting too much pressure on this thing to be the thing that's going to make me happy, or can I let this go? Like you talk about your house, and downsizing. The house that you had, it served a purpose. That the big,
Right.
house in the suburbs. You guys were raising 4 kids, is that right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you needed this space, certainly, to be able to raise them and to provide for them and to do all that. But then once circumstance changed in your life, it became a question of, well, do we still need this? Do we hold
Right.
on to this because this was the home that we raised our kids in. And
Mhm.
that could be, for its own sake, I guess that's fine for some people. But for you, it felt like there was a question to say, well, maybe now's the time for us to let this go. And I think you talk about this in the book also, and we can give this as a gift to somebody else. There's another young
Right.
family that could be up and coming that could use this gift. And so that's the
Right.
place of charity then, of being able to say, well, I can detach myself from this and then give
Mhm.
it, to somebody else.
Right. And as a matter of fact, the people who bought our house had 4 kids, just like we did, only younger. They were all little kids at the time. And so it was actually really kind of heartwarming. But on the other hand, too, though, in our country, we just have kept getting bigger and bigger. So,
Mhm.
I think about the fact that our parents and so on, they raised more kids than we have usually.
Right.
Or they have 6 kids in tiny homes. In fact, the place where we now live it was originally for Pentagon workers, and people in the military, actually, during World War II. Or it was built right before World War II. And so these are tiny homes. This is 1,100 square feet, 1,500 square feet. Some of them, are the big ones. And they had 6 kids. I'm
Wow.
like, how the heck did they do it? Because when we first moved in, we couldn't even fit our dining room table in the place we moved in. We're like, this big, beautiful dining room table, which I discovered that I was very attached to.
Right.
So, um, yeah,
But
yeah, I
we
don't
did
know.
it. You're right, and that's a great question
Right.
to ask. And I think the difference is that those
Yeah,
kids were out. They were out playing with the other kids in the neighborhood, riding their bikes, and they were
they were.
outside. And so, you would hear
Right.
stories of that where we would just let the kids play. All right, just be back in time for dinner. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
it. And so there's been a
Yeah.
real shift now culturally in community
Hmm.
wise about how we, consider our neighborhoods
Right.
and what are the things that we're looking for. And I think it's a great question to be asking, and I'm not really sure how to reclaim that. I don't really have an answer for that outside of just
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that in terms of
Right.
how do we move back, to some of that, finding that safety again.
Some people are trying,
Yeah.
actually. There are people who are, I think some of the younger, like some of my kids' age, they are less. Some of them are less um, prone to want to go move out into the suburbs and have a long commute. So, like, none of our kids have a long commute. So they kind of like looked at what we were doing, and they're like, I'm not sure I don't know that a big huge house is worth that.
Right.
And so I think there is a shift in the sense of value. I mean, I'm not saying everybody, is doing that, but I do feel that some people are trying, to, and then to maybe live, with a greater sense of community, or at least they can place a greater emphasis on it in their lives,
Yeah.
and however that may appear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No, that's good. That's good. So bring it back to kind of like detachment and
yeah,
learning how
yeah.
to let go of things. There's a phrase I think you're borrowing from Gary Lagrange here, who's a writer in the spiritual
Yeah.
life, who says that be caution of this wicked sadness that we have,
Yeah.
at times and of course, my mind, I really originally went to like a Boston accent, of course, because, that's the thing.
Yeah,
It's a wicked, it's wicked sadness. I can't do a Boston
yeah,
accent, I just ruined it. So,
yeah,
but anyways, but, just the notion that like, if we feel that we're sad, and I can relate to that. I think about that, at times when you start asking like, do I have enough? Especially in this time of year where all the advertisements are coming, for you to buy, for you to buy, for you to buy, and you're
mm,
like, yeah, I want to buy for the kids, but then I'm like, oh man, I
right,
want that new kind of shiny thing also. And then you look at the
yeah.
budget and you're like, man, I don't have it in the budget, like there's not enough money to go
Yeah,
get that nice shiny thing. And there's a little bit of a tension I know I can experience in my own heart at times where I'm like, oh man, like I wish I had a little bit more, to be able to buy that. And that's the place within me where I've experienced, that wicked sadness, which is that
yeah,
it's wicked in the sense that it's a distorted sadness. It's not that I inherently need those things. It's not like a sadness that's related to a mourning of something that was genuinely loved, like a loss of a family member or the loss of a job or something where you feel that mourning that's appropriate because that's a loss of something that genuinely was good. But it's like this distorted sadness of the things that I think I need that I can't quite get, is really kind of a confusing place. But I really hung to that phrase because it's like, yeah, I have to be cautious within my own heart, of messages and advertising or things that I want to purchase that I don't have the resources to purchase, and not feel sad about that, because it's not really that I'm mourning something that's good. I'm just kind of in this distorted sense, feeling sad for myself that I don't have enough money to be able to purchase that thing. What more would you say about that wicked sadness and how to have caution against it?
Yeah, that is so true, that what you describe. And I think it's, it's exemplified by that scripture passage, with the rich young man.
Yes.
And it really or that capsulizes the whole point of it, because he comes to Christ, and he says, like, what do I need to do, to attain the kingdom of God, or what? I can't remember. I'm not very good with quoting scripture exactly. But anyway, what else do I need? What do I need to do? I've kept the commandments. I've done all these things. He's a good person. Yep. He's a good person. And Christ says, well, you have to give everything away and come follow me. Give away all that you have. Follow me. And he went away sad. Mm-hmm. So he went away sad because he couldn't detach from his things. And it's the same experience that you described, with that sadness that is somehow, it's not a noble sadness,
right.
And it's the same thing I think a lot of women experience. I would think we tend to experience it like in spades because of social media, like Instagram. I can't go through Instagram without seeing somebody else's house, somebody else's stuff, their clothes, and it's almost like it's all about that. It's all designed to suck me in and make me want to have this. Of course, I don't have to look at it. I don't have to look at Instagram, but I do.
And it is designed to do exactly what you just said. But you're right. But keep going.
Sometimes it's fellow Catholic. It could be. That's the thing that's like almost ironic. It's like sometimes it's a fellow Catholic person who's on Instagram and who not only says, beautiful words of wisdom, but also they're selling something. They're selling makeup, or they're, it's almost I sometimes feel like I'm in a strange world, that and I'm all part of it too, because I'm willingly complicit in this. And then I begin to feel envy toward these people. And then I have to go to confession and confess, but
and that is the word is envy there, and I'll say this as I was thinking, okay, so, I work for Faith and Marriage, and we do our marriage retreats. The majority of our retreats that we do at the St. Joseph Abbey Retreat Center in Covington, Louisiana, which I know you guys have been to Covington. Walker Percy fans, shared with me some stories that you guys have done, which is great. And so in the retreat center, in the Abbey Church itself, the artwork that's in the church is really beautiful, and we've gotten a number of tours of it to be able to see and understand the artwork. Well, in the main kind of altarpiece in the front, underneath Jesus, where you see him kind of displayed in this in the risen Christ position, which is beautiful. There's like these little, I don't know what you call them. I guess I don't want to say alcoves, but it's just these little kind of cutouts around the altarpiece. And there's 9 of them. And what the artist decided to do was to draw the 7 capital vices in each of those, plus Satan as the demon of the world, I guess. And then an 8th capital vice, which is particular to monastic life, called murmuring. Where murmuring, Saint Benedict would always say, murmuring is would kill a monastic community. But the reason I bring all this up is because the way that he drew was kind of like a demon kind of expressing the emotion of the vice, and the way that he drew the demon expressing the emotion of envy was through sadness. That you would see this demon kind of like crying and like feeling sad, and it speaks to this right here. That this is in our tradition, is to recognize that that there is this kind of temptation to feel sorry for ourselves because we don't have what the other person has. And I don't have the home like the other people on Instagram, or I don't have the makeup, or I don't have the device, or I don't have the other thing, or whatever that might be. And just being cautious about that, and paying attention to that within our own heart. And that's different than like losing your grandfather's watch. Okay. Like, you know, like if you have like a family heirloom or something that is of high personal value, and that gets lost. Well, the reason you're sad about that is because you feel like the loss of a connection of something to somebody that you loved. And so that's different than what we're speaking about here.
Right. Exactly.
And being able to sift that within ourselves. Yeah. So again, just thinking about how do we detach from that? You know, you said earlier, like, I'm a willing participant. I don't have to be on Instagram. You know, I can let it go. Like if it's not helping me, if it's just conjuring up feelings of sadness, I can let it go, you know. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of struggling with as I was writing that. One of the thoughts that kept coming back to me was that we really have to keep our eyes fixed on our ultimate goal. You know, it's like you get lost in the small stuff and in the stuff that doesn't really matter when you lose sight of either something that is truly important or your ultimate goal. So like, I think that's why like St. Ignatius would have in his spiritual exercises, he would have you contemplate your death, you know, and we never do that anymore. Like whoever even talks about that. I mean, we've had, I guess in Advent, we've had a few, readings that might maybe point us in that direction. That is sort of the second coming thing. But like we rarely think about that. And yet if you talk to somebody who has a terminal diagnosis, you know, somebody who's struggling with cancer, I mean, all of a sudden everything comes into focus. They know what's important and what's not important. And we kind of lose sight of that if we're just like going along our merry way. And the other thing is to remember, you know, our ultimate goal is not here. It's heaven. That is our true, and that's hard for us. But if we meditate on it, I think that helps to think about it. And it's interesting because I was just talking to a group of women, and one of the ladies said that she had one very, very valuable possession that she was like, it was an original Steinway. Like she had a Steinway piano. Oh my gosh. And she said it was her only like truly valuable possession. And she said they encountered some, I think maybe her husband, I don't know what it was, lost his job or something. And anyway, she had to sell the piano. And she said it was absolutely horrible that she had to sell it. And it might even have been like handed down, you know, to her family. So it was on top of it. It was really, really hard. And she said the only thing that got her through it, selling it, was that she had watched the movie where it was about escaping from a prison camp or escaping from a concentration camp or something like that, an old movie. And she said, if you wanted to escape from the prison camp, you couldn't have anything with you. You had to you're just gonna have to run for your life. And she said, right then she realized that her present life was more like that. Like she was gonna have to, she couldn't bring anything with her to heaven. So she was gonna have to, in order to be, you know, free, interiorly detached and free to follow God and to love God and to do his will, she had to not have any possessions she was clinging to. And so that kind of helped her get through this time. But that would be really hard. I mean, I had a hard time with my dining room table. I don't know what I'd do if I had a Steinway, you know. But,
Hey everybody, this is Dr. Mario Sakasa. We're just taking a quick break here from my conversation with Laraine Bennett. Just want to encourage you to check out our list of upcoming marriage retreats for 2023. Here we are at the start of the year is a wonderful opportunity to think about what are the things that we want to improve upon. And certainly, as we've been discussing this episode, letting go of stuff and decluttering a little bit is certainly a great goal for you to start this year. But another goal is your marriage and that vocation that God has called you to. So if you want to come on one of our upcoming marriage retreats at the beautiful St. Joseph Abbey Retreat Center in Covington, Louisiana, head on over to faithandmarriage.org. We've got a full list of retreats there. Check them out. You can see that most of them are parish sponsored, but that's okay. Put yourself on the waiting list. Often the parishes don't fill those retreats up, and we open it up to the general public. So go ahead and look at a retreat, put yourself on a waiting list, and we would love for you to come to one of our upcoming retreats where you can have a beautiful weekend with your spouse, reconnecting, growing in prayer, and just having some time together to have some meaningful conversations. So want more information about our upcoming marriage retreats? Head on over to faithandmarriage.org. No, I agree. And I think that's a beautiful story, is just to remind ourselves like what our focus is. And I'll share one more story here, and then we'll kind of keep going in this conversation. This is true. I had a friend of mine who recently had just a little bit of a scare. The doctors were seeing something that they thought could have been, something really scary. And, that first moment where the doctors are like, okay, this is what we're thinking it is, but we have to do a couple more tests before we can rule it out. Well, in that week where they were thinking that it was, the diagnosis, I can't remember exactly what it was, he was really scared and was really nervous and had a lot of anxiety, about like he's got young kids and he's the provider for the family. Like, what does this mean if I'm going to die soon? All those questions were coming up. And so a week later he calls me and I'm in my office right here and I'm chatting with him on the phone, and he says, just everything's fine. It's clear. Like, there's nothing wrong, and we're just going to keep an eye on it. But it's good news. I said, man, that's amazing. And he said, yeah, but this experience even this past week has really shaped me. And I said, well, in what way? And he said, well, I just feel like now more attuned to the fact that time is limited and it's a limited resource. And so I want to make sure that I'm more available to my kids and not wasting, as much time as possible. And I said, well, okay. Wow. It's really, really profound, So we hung up the phone, and this is true. No joke. When he called, I had the iPad, and I was like watching a YouTube video about what? I have no idea. So like I paused the YouTube video and to have this conversation where he's like, where he's going on and on talking about, how he's going to be more efficient with his time. And I was like, well, darn it.
Yeah.
He just spat in this soup, so it's because I was just wasting time for like 15 minutes, watching some video about Lord knows what or whatever, Yeah. So I do have to confess that I did finish watching the video, and then I turned it off. And then I went and was hanging out with my kids. So anyways, true story. Audience, do not think less of me.
So true.
Think less of me. All right. So thinking about, just material possessions and this stuff as well. One of the things that comes up in the book often, and I love it, is a conversation about clutter and how to like work through the clutter that we develop in our lives. And not just in the digital landscape in terms of if you have more than 10 windows open, close it. Let's just going to get that out of the way. All right. If you have more than 5, really, I mean, you can't, if you have 30, like just do yourself a favor, shut the browser. You're not going back to them anyways. There's your tip. But just even in our physical space, having clutter. One of the things that I think you're quoting here, Jacqueline Dupuy. And she says, clutter is just a visual representation of delayed decisions, which is just, that's like, that's it. That's right. But you also say in the book that clutter has a way of triggering anxiety. Why does clutter do that? And you think about your room that you felt was like this 12 by 12 big junk drawer. Why did nobody want to go into that room? Why does clutter generate anxiety within us?
Yeah. Well, actually, thanks to, I'm sure as you as a psychologist are probably aware of this. But the neuroscience has come up with this, like they're now, analyzing the brain and what, the different aspects of the brain and the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and whatnot. But they found that when the eye sees clutter, the brain is like problem solve, just automatically goes into that fight or flight, which is perceived as anxiety by us. I mean, it doesn't have to be, because my husband's always saying, well, if you reframe it, then you can transform your anxiety into something else. It doesn't have to be anxiety. But for the purposes of this book, I'm suggesting, how about cleaning up the clutter, instead of reframing like, oh, I just have a messy desk, like, who was it? Maximilian Kolbe.
Yep.
I think
there's that picture of him for that picture with just
yes,
everything. Stresses me out looking at it. I'm not going to lie.
I know, me too, right? Yeah, I know. But anyway, so we're suggesting, how about decluttering, and how about organizing? And yeah, to that end, I do have in each chapter there's tips from the professional organizer, because I'm not a professional organizer. She's professional. She gave me one for each chapter, and it's really fantastic. But yeah, the delayed decision making is exactly what it is.
Well, it's it, because you see the problem and you feel like you have to solve it. And I know for myself that that's a real trigger, and I've talked about this, in my lectures, is that like the aforementioned cup earlier, it used to be this thing that would just really get me going, because I tend to live where I have, excuse me, 100 things going on at one time. Like I'm borderline ADHD, and I got a lot of stuff kind of happening all at the same time. And so I take it on myself to know that I have, 100 things to do, and I'm fine. I can do 100 things. But if I'm at step 27 and someone else gives me 101, well, that 101 starts to stress me out, because that's being put on me. Or the 102, 103, that stuff starts getting put on me. And that's when I start getting frustrated, because I feel, well, my own helplessness in that, and yada, yada. I've done a lot of work, my own self about this. But for years, I used to just blow up at the kids because they wouldn't clean up after themselves. And because I would look at it and I would see it exactly like you said, is that's a problem that I'm supposed to solve, and that problem has been put on me because of your negligence. And then of course that would translate into accusations, just like that one that I just leveled against my children, or accusations against my wife for not valuing the things that I value, and all that other fun stuff that we can kind of get into. It took a long time for me to be able to kind of process what was happening, and accepting my own helplessness in that space, but then also accepting that I don't have to be operating at 100% all the time. Like I can be operating at 80 and then leave room for some of those other things that happen in life to just kind of naturally process. That's okay. We can deal with that. And so now when I see the cups, I still want cleanliness to be a value that my kids possess and a virtue that they have. And so I still tell them to clean it up, but it doesn't come across with this bite. Well, 9 out of 10 times it doesn't come across as the bite. There's still, I'm still human, there's still those moments where it comes out, but the majority of the time I can be direct with them in a way that's trying to teach them and to discipline them in the right sense, but not just blowing up, at them for its own sake, because that anger that we feel then is just, as Brene Brown says, we're just discharging blame. We're just discharging emotion that isn't really helping anybody, do anything.
Exactly. But I think when that happens, when you blow up, you're probably acting out of the amygdala. Like that would be in the fight or flight. You're in that mode. In other words, you're fighting. Some people would flee. They would just, I don't know what they would do. But, so in that response, like if you, yell at the kids or something, that's your fight mode. But once you shift, like through reframing or whatever, like you would say to yourself, wait a minute, this is a teachable moment. So let me help my kids learn how to be organized and how to be clean and put away their things. Then like that's already shifting out of it. So you've shifted away and you're into the more empathetic realm. You're into the compassionate and rational mode. And really, kids can and ought to learn. It's not like we're saying, oh, just, you should never yell at your kids and just let them be messy all the time. No, it's yeah, absolutely. Order is very important, and they can be taught. And of course, it takes a long time because, kids are kids. And but that's exactly that's a really great example, I think, of that, what happens when we get into that anxiety mode.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so decluttering for me is very
Yeah.
therapeutic. I love shredding, I love throwing stuff away. Like so when
Yeah,
we
me
just
too.
moved from New Orleans to Charlotte, and it was like taking our junk that we didn't need and just throwing it into those big trash receptacles at the city dump was very therapeutic for me. I was just like, throw it all away, like just get rid of it
Yeah.
all. And so
Yeah.
I tend to be on one extreme of it where I basically told my wife, I said, listen, this is what we're going to do. We are going to pack the kids up in the minivan, pack up a suitcase of clothes. We're going to set the house on fire, claim that it was an accident, claim insurance, and we're just gone. That's
Yeah.
this is my ideal situation. This is how I want this move to look. And she was like, I don't think we could do that. Like I don't think
No,
that's
let's
not
not.
realistic. It's just not.
Yeah.
That's just not practically possible. And so
Right.
this has been a place of kind of yin and yang and push and pull, between us. At times is decluttering, is throwing things away, and so how with the work that you do with the temperaments, I'm sure that plays into this as well. But
Yeah.
what do you think in terms of helping couples navigate those differences when one tends to be a little bit more, kind of just get it all done, and the other one is a little bit more tolerant, of the clutter. It doesn't raise that same level of anxiety as it does
Yeah.
in the other, having different
That
thresholds
is
of that.
such a great question. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking it probably does have to do with temperament a little bit, and maybe also, probably your family of origin, like,
Hmm.
how you were raised.
Yep.
And so, like, I was thinking, not that it matters which temperament is which, but I also am much like, I like to have, like, I don't like to see clutter. And Art, on the other hand, he's like, he doesn't notice it. So he'll have like books piled. I showed him the Maximilian Kolbe, picture, like, hey, this looks like your desk, and,
Hint, hint.
and he's like, I know. And he's like, really? But he doesn't see it. So, yeah, I think the one of the mistakes that I make is all of a sudden, okay, it's time, we've got to deal with this, I've got a plan, we're gonna, go through all your files, and I'm gonna fix all the files, and we're gonna do it. And he's like, now, it's like we're just sitting down to dinner or something, wait, can I finish dinner? And so my mistake is like we're gonna just like do it right now, and then, so what I've had to learn over, I would say, over many years, and I'm still learning, is to schedule the thing. And this, actually, I learned from Art the communication skill that I think it's called the soft startup from
Hmm.
Gottman's. I think
Hmm.
that's one of them. But anyway, the idea is, you say, there's something that in fact, you have to kind of really back up if you want to be really delicate. You go, there's something I really want to talk to you about, and now is not the time, but, can we chat about something that's kind of bothering me a little bit? And usually he'll say, oh yeah, well, let's talk about it now, or, it'll be maybe later because, he's in the middle of something. But then you could say, we don't have to do this right now, but one of the things that I'd like to work on is maybe we could kind of organize your files a little bit in your office, or something like that, in a very gentle and non-threatening and not accusatory way. And I think that always works way better than when I go in there and I'm like, I've had it up to here with all this stuff and I need to deal with it now, and I'm taking over. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a great idea in terms of helping people to have that soft startup. And
Yeah.
I think that what's coming through my mind also is just really resisting blaming. Like you said,
Right.
Art doesn't even see it,
Yeah.
doesn't even see it to the same degree. and myself, Kristen's the same way. I think they're both
Yeah,
phlegmatics, by the
they
way.
literally
So
don't.
yeah.
Yes,
So the
that's what
color
I
the,
would say for sure.
the sanguine cholerics, the choleric sanguines in the group,
Yeah,
having the interview right
exactly.
now, we're like, get it done, man. Like, what's the matter?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so I've so yes, the soft startup. What I've also learned is having blinders on just certain
Hmm.
parts of the house and just kind of acquiescing them, and being like,
Hmm.
that is not my domain. I am not responsible over that room. And so however that's going to work, that's what's going to work. And so in our new house, you come into the front door, stairs go right up, and to the left we have one living room, and then back to the far back side, right side of the house is the family room. This front living room we turned into kind of our homeschool room, and I purposely put the homeschool desk against the wall that has the stairs, so I can go up the stairs and not have to look at it. That's like, it's fine.
Ah,
It's out of sight, out of mind. It's not my
mhm.
desk. It's not, that's my
Yeah,
wife. That's my kids' area. That's our homeschool area. It's allowed to have mess. It's allowed to have it's certain space, whatever works for her in that part of the house. That's fine. I just don't need to see it, And so I just
yeah,
I walk up the
absolutely.
stairs, and then I know the places that I have kind of control over in my own space. And
Yeah,
so certainly I have found that is helpful. That's the way that we've
yeah,
been able to kind of work. But then also that soft startup, I think, is a key as well, to help people to say, listen, if it is bothering you, rather than just stuffing it, and stuffing
right.
it, because then what ends up happening is that when you do that, it's going to come out, and it's going to come out
Hmm.
at an inappropriate time. It's going to come out
Right.
in the middle of the night when that last thing happens, and then you just start unloading on the other
Explode.
person,
Hmm.
having never told them any of this is bothering you.
Hmm.
And so finding a way to be able to communicate that, and then to negotiate and have conversations about these things, because some of the stuff, they may have a reason, and they may have that may be the way that they have things kind of organized in their mind, you know,
Exactly.
and
Actually,
and that's fine.
hmm.
That's fine, as
Yeah.
long as I can know that, understand that, I can respect that. And so
Right.
that's where conversation is important. But there's a place where,
Exactly.
again, like I said, there's a yin and a yang here, where
Hmm.
like I said, I'm more inclined to throw things away, and my wife is more inclined to save them. And there's certainly been times where I'm like, we just got to get rid of it. We get rid of it. Or there's been some times where I've gotten rid of it, and didn't ask. I shouldn't confess that.
Oops.
But
Yeah. I
and
think
then
I
like,
might have done that in the
yeah,
past too.
and then like 6 months
Guilty.
later, there's like, so where's that one thing? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Oops.
well, you haven't
Yeah.
thought of it in six
Right.
months, so that's got to count, right? So,
Yeah.
but
That's usually the time frame. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. No, that is a really good point. Yeah.
so
Um,
God love us as
yeah.
we love our spouses, and try to honor things together. So, okay, so you talked a
Yeah.
little bit about kind of finding order,
Yeah.
and this is kind of using kind of Jordan Peterson's language here, a little bit of
Hmm.
finding the balance between kind of order and chaos, within our lives, and
Yeah.
we're kind of speaking about this, but it's more than just having an organized room. There's something about
Right.
making a room beautiful, and that's one of his
Yeah.
recommendations. One of his rules in his latest book, is to
Yes.
pick a room, and make it
Make
beautiful.
one room.
That
Hmm.
was my favorite chapter of the second book, I would say, is that.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
speaking about beauty, like,
Yeah.
what why is that important, in our space? Because again, we're going back to this conversation about minimalism, and this isn't just about having spares, having nothing on the walls. This isn't
Right.
that's not what we're saying at all. It's about finding the right way of being able to make things kind of
Right.
beautiful and alive, and trimming things and decluttering things helps, for beauty to kind of emerge. So I don't know, what are your thoughts about this, about
Right.
having a beautiful home even when it's small? What are your thoughts about
Yeah.
that, and why'd you include that in the book?
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. I came across a philosopher, a Greek philosopher. His name is Christos Yanaris, and he said the Greek word for beauty is kalos. That's what he said. And includes order, harmony, and decorum. And I thought that was really beautiful. And originally, the universe itself, there's this beautiful quote from Isaiah. I pulled it out. It's I used it in the book. It's God formed the earth and did not create it a chaos. He formed it to be inhabited. And I was thinking about that. It's like he wants us to live in and appreciate the beautiful creation, this beautiful creation. And he also wants us to have a beautiful homes, I think. I mean, in the sense of order and decorum, and especially that order, which is the right order. So like, we want our homes to reflect that we are children of God, adopted children of God. And, I think, so it's not so much about like, well, what picture do I have on the wall, or what beautiful, collection do I have of, of, of mugs or whatever, though it's nice to have a nice collection of mugs. But it's that we want our homes ultimately to be these places that are a place of light, refuge, and peace, that where people feel welcomed, where you feel you can welcome other people in, and where we're serving both God and each other. So that's really ultimately what we want, not necessarily a minimal house, or all white, or whatever, or beautiful, expensive paintings on the wall, but that beauty that comes from the proper order of things, and of not having chaos in your house. And so I put in the book, I think that, like, think of tidying up as being a little bit like God, in that creating order out of chaos. And so that's really what we want for our homes, and how we achieve it. It could be very minimal beauty, in the sense of, excuse me, it just might be a vase of flowers on your kitchen table. That may be it in that, but then, that is beauty right there. And you've created a beauty in that room. And so I think that is very important, because beauty does help us think of God. And so I think that would be a lovely goal for everybody to have, is to create at least one room that's beautiful in their home. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the way you talked about it, just with regards to invitation, that there is an invitational aspect to beauty, and it invites us, and it compels us. And so when we do have a room or a house that does speak to that, again, not for vanity's sake, not so that I can take pictures and get as many likes as possible on Instagram,
Right.
but that it's in the context of a spiritual life, that there is something, to be said about making rooms beautiful and resting them. Because as you said earlier,
Right.
in the state of clutter, it's hard for us to rest when we think that we have to solve all these problems. So when things are tidied up, it does give us a capacity to be able to rest and to be at
Exactly.
ease, within the environment that we're in, which ultimately is really what homes are supposed to be. Is supposed to be that safe space, that place of rest, that place where we have some order, some control over the entropy that's constantly fighting at us,
Yeah.
and nipping at our heels, that we can bring those things back into the fold. So
Yeah,
I think it's
exactly.
I think it's good. I think it's good.
Mm, yeah.
So what practical tips? You have a lot of practical tips here, throughout the book, which are beautiful, especially from the professional here. And there's another one that
Yeah.
kind of stuck out, for me, and I'd love to get kind of some insight onto this. You said, all right, so we've been talking about kind of all these beautiful ideas of kind of materialism and detachment and simplicity, and beauty, and bringing, beauty into our homes.
Mhm.
But practically speaking, here, kind of what are some things that you would recommend for people to be kind of first steps? Okay, so like they're hearing this and they're saying, that sounds great. Where do I begin? So where's a
Right.
good place for people to begin?
Right. And that's a really good question, because like, a lot of times what happens is we're instantly flooded with anxiety when we start to think, like, if I thought about the garage, or the messy office room that we had. So the idea is you just start with something very, very small. And the organizer did mention that. Just start with take one tiny step. And it could be just cleaning out a drawer. That's it. And or doing the dishes. And she recommended, one of the things I loved of her tips is, she said, think about it. Also, you could offer it up,
Yeah.
for somebody. Say a prayer while you're doing that thing. When she does the dishes, she says a prayer for somebody whose name begins with D, and so it was like, it is really sweet. So, but it is definitely true, that just starting small, you will immediately have a sense of accomplishment, and it decreases the anxiety. So you don't have that looming cloud hanging over your head. Oh, I've got to clean the whole house. Don't go there. That's
That's
not the
right.
place to go. Yeah. And the other thing is, I was thinking about, one of the questions that you had asked earlier on. It kind of reminded me of the tip from actually Marie Kondo, which is, the things you have should spark joy.
Mm.
So, when you were saying your temptation is throw things out, sometimes you do just have to throw things out. But one way to help, other people who are less inclined to throw things out, is to ask them, really, realistically, like, have you worn this in the past 6 months to a year, or
Mhm.
even longer? Do you plan to fix it? Are you gonna, I love this, except there's a hole in this dress. No, like, you're not gonna fix that hole in the dress. It's just, it's time to let it go. Or that sparking joy phenomenon. If it's something that is very meaningful to you, then keep it. It's like, it's a family heirloom, grandfather's watch. Yeah, so keep those things and don't beat yourself up over over those things. So those are some tips that definitely I, agree with, that given by the professional organizer.
Two great suggestions. So the first one, just to say, and that's a great lesson for anybody who's starting something new, starting a new endeavor. We're recording the episode right now in December, but this episode will drop in January, so it's probably a good kind of New Year's resolution kind of thought, is to say, listen, like, if you're starting something new, like, you have to start small and then make progress. And then when you make progress, you start building a sense of momentum. And once you get a sense of momentum underneath you, that's when things start feeling good. So if decluttering your home or minimalizing things is one of your goals for 23, then praise the Lord and let that be one of your goals. The thing is, that you're going to be fighting yourself in this process, and there's going to be frustration as it happens, but don't let that frustration overwhelm you. Start small, with a room that feels safe enough or easy enough for you to start. And then from there, kind of keep moving, one step at a time. As they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Which
Yeah,
is really a
exactly.
funny expression, when you think about it.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
know.
who the heck
Because
would ever want to eat an elephant? Like,
I know, right? Has anybody? I mean, I
I don't
mean,
know. I've never eaten an elephant. I've never been offered elephant, so
no,
I'm not
me
sure.
either.
I'm not sure where that
Yeah,
comes from. So
exactly.
I'm going to
Yeah.
shift that. So how do you move mountains?
Mhm.
One rock at a time,
Yeah,
one
there
stone at
you
a
go.
time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's
Exactly. And this ties in with Saint Therese, because she would say, her way of, becoming holy, becoming a saint. She had a huge goal. She wanted to be a saint, not only a saint, but a great saint. And it almost seemed, like absurd, and to her too. And she said, well, how am I going to do it? Well, I can't do it except with the help, with the grace, except by the grace of God. And I can do only very little things. She said, I'm only a very little person, and I can only do very little things. But she could do each tiny little thing with great love, which is what we can do ourselves. And as we are decluttering or cleaning up or organizing, we do each little task that we've chosen to start out with, and we do that with great love, and we offer it for our family, for souls in purgatory, whatever, so that's how we can imitate Saint Therese in that regard.
Yeah, amen. Just trying to make these things very practical, in people's lives. And
Yeah.
this is the beauty of our faith, is it's very incarnational. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't skip over certain people's lives and says, well, only these people are the ones who are called to salvation. No, we're all called to
Right.
salvation. And so we all have the capacity to
Mhm.
be able to take these lessons and to learn from them. And so I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful. The other piece there that you said about, really assessing like the things that you have and saying, okay, well, what really sparks joy? What are really things that have
Mhm.
value to me? And whatever those
Mm-hmm.
things are, we're going to keep those. But the other
Yeah.
things that don't, and they're just sticking around just because they've been there, those are the things that we need to have a little bit of courage and be able to let go of those things. And again,
Mm-hmm.
that process of detaching is as we've been saying the whole time, is part of our growth, in the spiritual life.
Yeah.
So this has been great. Laraine, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and everything that you've offered about the book and all the great research that you've done into it as well. So if people want to pick it up, how can they pick it up? Where can they go? What's the best way for them to buy the book? Or if you're speaking somewhere close by to them, how can they hear you?
Well, actually go to sophiainstitute.com, and that's the best way to buy the book. Also, it's available on Amazon, but not everybody wants to be contributing to Amazon at this time. So, I mean, some people have pointed that out. So definitely Sophia Institute Press, go to their website and you can get the book. And we also have a website. It's artandlarainebennett.com. And so, you can send us a message that way if you wanted to find out if we're in your area or whatever for speaking. Yeah.
Sounds
Mm-hmm.
great. Sounds great. Well, thanks, Laraine, for those
Thank
recommendations and
you.
those resources. So final question, ask all my first-time guests, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Wow. Um, that's a great question. I was just reading, I reread every year this. Pope Benedict the 16th wrote a beautiful meditation on Advent, and he was talking about waiting and how, and Advent is a time of waiting, but and aren't we all waiting? Actually, we're waiting for the second coming of Christ, and we're waiting for him to come into our lives at Christmas. And the only kind of waiting that is actually meaningful is waiting with hope, is having that hope that we will one day be called to be in heaven with God and the angels and the saints. And so that's the hope that I have, is the hope in Jesus Christ, and that to remember that this is a time of waiting, as we're on pilgrimage to our true
Amen.
home.
Amen. Which is heaven. And we all have that longing. We all have that something
Mhm.
inside of us that the Lord calls us to wait. We wait upon him to bring answers to these things. And so I love that, just to be able to wait, in hope and to believe, certainly that at the end, heaven is our ultimate destination, and to be able to hold on to that. So, well, thanks, Laraine, for sharing that and that little tidbit from Pope Benedict the 16th and his words there about Advent. So, well, thanks for joining me on the show. God bless you, and yeah, just keep doing the good work that you guys are doing.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been just such a pleasure.
All right, well, that certainly wraps up a wonderful conversation that I had with Laraine Bennett, talking about the little way, the little flower, decluttering, all these wonderful things that we have to kind of grow in understanding of our own hearts and lives. But providentially, here we are recording this, I don't know, about a week or so after hearing the news of Pope Benedict's passing. And so I really just wanted to take a few minutes to be able to offer some thoughts about Pope Benedict and what he has meant to me in my own life. I can share honestly that I've had, and I've talked about this in the podcast many times, that I've had a couple moments, a couple deep crises of faith. And the first one happened sometime around, 2011. And it was one of those moments where I was just really upside down, not knowing kind of what I believed and not really knowing or sure about the Lord and his love for me and questions of providence. Well, it was the world was definitely upside down for me kind of in that moment. And one of the things that honestly got me through that moment was Pope Benedict's, well, then Joseph Ratzinger's book, The Introduction to Christianity. A friend of mine gave it to me, and if you don't know what the book it is, it's basically his kind of treatise on the creed and why it's important for us to know and kind of go into depth about each element of the creed. Well, the very beginning of the creed, of course, is I believe. And so what does that mean? So the first chapter is dedicated to this statement of belief. And what does it mean to have faith? And what does it mean to genuinely believe in the Lord and his love and his goodness? And so he does this wonderful job of equating faith to like a man shipwrecked at sea who's holding onto a plank of wood. And that plank of wood is the only thing that's separating him from the abyss. And that image really hit me because that's kind of what I felt at that time in my life, was kind of shipwrecked. The things that I thought I believed, or the things I had security on in terms of my faith, were completely obliterated. And I felt like this man that he's describing, just being lost at sea, holding onto this plank, and this plank of wood is the only thing that's separating me from the abyss of cynicism, skepticism, atheism, all that other stuff. But what he did in just giving that image to me, it helped me to not feel guilty for having the doubts. It helped me to not feel guilty for having the questions that I was asking, and rather that the Lord was present in those questions and saying, yeah, you know what, it's okay. Like the things you thought you believed, we needed to kind of dial it up. We needed to kind of grow and mature a little bit in those things. Some of the things that you thought were me were actually idols, and it's time to let go of those things. The hardships you're going through, yeah, it's really hard, and there's nothing wrong with it. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just, unfortunately, the circumstances of life and sin and the challenges that were happening. But it's okay if you could hold on to faith through the midst of those doubts, then you're going to get through it. And that has been a theme that has sparked this show and talking about what it means to always have hope despite the challenges and the circumstances that we face in our lives. And if you've been a long-time listener to the show, you know that the very first episode was with a friend of mine, Chris O'Neill. We talked about this very topic of what does it mean to have faith, or rather, the very first episode was with Jennifer Miller. The second episode was with Chris O'Neill. And so this has been part of what I've wanted to spread as a message, is to help people to understand that faith isn't always this kind of neat and tidy thing that we want it to be. It's not some trinket. And Pope Benedict says this also in that book, that it's not, the kingdom of God isn't some trinket that we can pull out and manipulate. It's like some toy or something that we have figured out. It's never that, because it's God and it's an eternal mystery, and life and its realities and its circumstances, of course, are always there to trip us up and to cause us to want to doubt God's providence and God's fatherhood, which is ultimately what sin is trying to do. So I share that all with you because without that message, without that book, and without the many, many teachings of Pope Benedict, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I wouldn't. I don't even know where I would be, in all sincerity, because my understanding of Christianity has been largely shaped by Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI's teachings. I have more books of his on my shelf than any other author, any other theologian, because I've always found his material to be practical, to be prayerful, to be anchored and rooted in the spiritual life, and he's very clear as a teacher. And so certainly my heart is heavy that we've lost a great giant, but I know that he is in heaven. I believe that he is in heaven praying for us, and I look forward to having the opportunity to be able to share my gratitude to him in person. Lord willing, should I be able to finish this journey with the great vigor and perseverance that he has demonstrated for us along the way. So we all pray as a church, gratitude for what Pope Benedict has given to us in his teachings, in his life, and we just pray for his soul and pray for his family as well, and just pray that his legacy may continue to grow, and that for generations people will be reading his teachings and going back to the thoughts that he has that are so clear, as I said, and so prayerful and so beautiful. So just sharing that all with you guys. Again, thank you so much for listening to the show. It's a blessing to know that the show has found you, and I pray that you guys have a great 2023. God bless everybody. Have a great day.